Okay, good evening everyone. Today we'll be installing a Cisco router, a switch, a Cisco ASA Firewall and a Windows 10 machine in EVE-NG. Connecting these up in a simple topology and getting them connected to the internet just to prove that that works. So if you go to the EVE-NG website, there are instructions on how to copy these files over and create the folders that you need. But this is all via Linux command line. I prefer just to use Windows SCP and use the GUI in order to do this. So here is my EVE-NG box here, and we'll just log into that. And I have the files ready that we're going to use for this video, just collected here. And the directory we're going to drop them into is this one here. So it's opt, unit lab, add-ons, and QEMU. So I'll copy these all over in one go, and then we'll change the names and drop them into the relevant directories. But I'll just copy them in one go so I can pause the video, and that bit's already done. Okay, so now that those are copied over, we need to place them into the relevant folders and change the file name. So we'll start with the Cisco ASA, create a new directory. Now there is a naming convention on the EVE-NG website for the ASA, it's basically anything that starts with ASAV. So I'll call this ASAV 9.12.2 so I know what version it is. And then the file we just need to rename to virtioa.qcal2, and we drop that in there, and EVE will automatically recognize that that's the ASA from the name of the folder. For the router, the name just has to start with VIOS, so I'll call this VIOS 15.8.3. And again, we just need to rename the file to virtioa. Drop that in the router folder. For the switch, the naming convention is VIOS L2, and then we can call it anything after that, so I'll just call it switch. And again, the switch file name is virtioa. Put that in there. For Windows, it's anything that starts Win dash, so we'll just call it Windows -10. Now with the ISO file, we just want to rename this and call it cd-rom.iso, and then when we boot the Windows machine, it'll look for the cd-rom ISO and kick off a fresh install. Okay, so now that's done, within EVE-NG there's a few commands that we have to run just to tidy this up. Okay, and the first one is this here. This just verifies the Cisco install images that we just moved over. And next we need to create a hard drive for the Windows 10 machine. So we do this by going to opt unit lab, opt QEMU bin QEMU-img create -f qcal2 virtioa dot qcal2, and then we give it a size, so I'm going to make it 40 gig. Okay, and that's created a hard drive for us to install the Windows 2. The next step is we create a new lab within EVE-NG. We'll just call it test for now. And we should have our images in here. Okay, so we'll have an ASA. Let's give it a couple more CPUs just to speed things up. We'll have a router. Switch. And our Windows 10 machine. What we'll also do is we'll drop a cloud on here. We'll call it Internet. Change the icon to a cloud. And we will use the NAT interface. Okay, so our internet will plug into our router into our firewall, firewall into the switch, and then switch into the PC. Okay, so we'll start from left to right. We'll boot all the devices up. And we will connect to the router first. We'll get a session going to all of them. Okay, so you can see on the Windows machine it's taken us to the install, which means it's found the CD-ROM. We'll come back to that in a bit. No, we do not want to enter the initial configuration. Okay, it's booted, that's good. And so is the switch. Okay, we are in. The first thing we want to do is set up the connection to the internet and test that. So we'll tell it to get its IP address from DHCP. We'll unshut the interface and hopefully we pick up an IP address. Okay, cool. There we go. 172.29.129.125. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll have a look at the ART table. Okay, Okay, so 125 is us, so 254, we'll use that as our default gateway, and we'll set up a default route pointing to that. 172.29.129.254. And now we should be able to ping out to the internet. Bingo. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll create a little transit network between us and the firewall. So we'll go for 10.11.0.1 /29. Okay, so what we'll also do is we'll tell it that we are going to have a 10.11 network. Yep. Going to 10.11.0. Oh. Yep, so what we've basically done there is told the router to send anything addressed to 10.11 this way, which we're going to give all these devices something within that range, and then everything else kick out to the internet. And we'll save that. Okay, on to the firewall. And give it a password. No. Okay. It's gig 0/1. Address 10.11.0.2 /29. We'll give it a name of outside. Set to 0, that's fine. Give it a no shut. It is our no shut by default. And we'll see if it's reachable. Okay. Got that. 11.0.1. Okay, one thing that is worth seeing is that when you come to install Windows, it's going to ask you where to install it. So you have to point it to a preset load of drivers that basically allows you to install to the hard drive that we created previously. So yeah, when we get to the screen, we go to load driver. Okay, yep, go to browse. I believe it's on the A or B drive. It's the B drive. Yep, storage. 2003 R2. AMD 64 actually, we're in the 64-bit. And yeah, they're all the same drivers, so next. Let's try the x86 one. No, I didn't think so. Should be AMD 64 one. Okay, so I realized what I did wrong there, and went back and adjusted it. Basically, when we created the hard drive, we ran this command here. This has to be run from within the directory where your Windows machine is. So what I did was navigated to where we created that Windows 10 folder, ran the same command again, and that created the hard drive within that folder. And then once I did that, this drive popped up once I pointed it to the drivers that we mentioned before. And then from here, it's just the same as any other installation. Okay, so that's the installation completed. So let's give our machine an IP address. In fact, before we do that, there's one thing that we have to do, and that is to save the state of this machine as it is on our EVE-NG box, so that if we want to use more than one Windows machine, we have the machine in this state, so just an installed fresh image to go. Okay, and the way we do that is we have to get together a couple of things. So we have to get our node ID, which is simple enough to get. We just click on the node itself, and this number here, number 4, and then we need our lab ID, which we do by going to on the side here, lab details. And here's our lab ID here. We also need a pod ID, but unless you're setting up multiple pods, it'll always be 0, so that's easy enough. Okay, so there's our lab ID, node IP is 4, and pod 0. one side, open up our EVE-NG, navigate to OPT, Unit Lab, EMP, and then pod number 0, lab ID, and then node ID. And then we run this command here, which saves the state of it, ready for use in the future. Commit being the operative word here. Okay, there we go. Now, anytime that we pull that node up, it will automatically give us a fresh install of Windows as we have it configured there. One last step is to remove the CD-ROM image so that we don't try and install a fresh version of Windows every time we kick it off. We'll just delete that. Okay, cool. So now, typical, I'll pause the video and let that reboot. Okay, so the machine's rebooted. I mean, one good aspect of that was that it booted back into Windows, so the image commitment that I made actually worked. And now we should be able to IP it and hopefully get out to the internet. Okay, so we were on 10, 11, 130, and it was a /24, the gateway.1, and we'll just use Google for now. Okay, that's a good sign. Okay, this is obviously not very responsive. There may be some settings that I have to tweak within Hyper-V just to make this perform a bit better. Okay, so we're seeing the interface for the ASA. and this is probably due to us having no rule set configured on the firewall and no NAT probably. But we can see the ASA, we know the ASA can reach out to the internet, and we're free to configure the switch, the firewall and the router as we please. So if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, then please like, share, subscribe, and thank you for watching.